He didn't even hear her name when she sat down, because the moment she smiled, he already knew she wasn't the one. Julius Hayes was a man who noticed everything. Numbers, contracts, small tells in people's eyes. But that night at the restaurant on 72nd Street, he noticed something he couldn't unsee: the waitress. The woman across from him, William Langford, or Willow, as she introduced herself with a soft laugh, was perfect on paper. His family had made sure of that. Educated, poised, from the right circles. His sister, Claire, had practically begged him to show up. "Just one dinner, Julius," she'd said. "You're 36, you can't just marry your work." But the instant the waitress walked up to their table, her voice calm and confident, Julius's focus slipped. "Good evening. Are you ready to order?" she asked, her tone low, slightly raspy, like she'd been talking all day. Her name tag said Linda. He should have looked away, should have stayed in the conversation about the animal kingdom, his sister's idea, of course. Claire knew that topic always drew him in. But Linda had a way of standing, balanced, steady, like she was grounded in her own world while he floated through his. Julius blinked, almost startled when Willow asked him a question he didn't hear. Linda noticed. Their eyes met for half a second too long before she smiled politely and took a step back. And that was it. Something in him, something he hadn't felt in years, shifted. The rest of the dinner was a blur. Willow was charming enough, but everything she said sounded rehearsed. Julius kept catching glimpses of Linda at other tables, her movements efficient and graceful, like she belonged everywhere and nowhere all at once. When Claire showed up halfway through the meal, pretending to be surprised to see him there, Julius. "Fancy running into you here." He finally realized what was happening. The whole evening was staged. They'd planted Willow there, had probably even coached her on what to say, how to smile, when to laugh. He was furious, but too exhausted to show it. He paid for dinner early, left a tip that could have covered a week's rent, and was about to walk out, until Linda caught up to him near the door. "Hey, sir," she said, holding out a pen. "You forgot this. You dropped it when you signed the bill." He looked down. It wasn't his pen. She smiled. "Guess I just needed a reason to say hi properly." He laughed, an actual, unforced laugh, and for the first time that night, felt something real. "Before we go on, take a second and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, your country and your city. I love seeing how far these stories travel. And if you're enjoying it so far, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. Alright, let's get back to the story. That simple moment turned into a conversation that lasted past closing time. She leaned against the counter while the rest of the staff cleaned up, and he stood by the door like a man who didn't know how to leave. Linda Morales was nothing like anyone Julius had ever known. She wasn't impressed by who he was. She didn't seem intimidated. She asked about him, not the money, not the company. When she found out he was into the animal kingdom, she laughed and said, "So you like watching lions eat other lions?" He grinned. "I like how they protect their pride. It's about loyalty." She raised an eyebrow. "Or control." That stuck with him. They didn't exchange numbers that night. She just said, "You come here often." "I'll see you when I see you." And he did. Every Thursday evening, like clockwork, Julius started showing up, not for dinner meetings or work calls, but for the chance to catch Linda's shift. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they didn't. But every time, there was that quiet tension between them, like both of them were trying not to admit they were already deep in something dangerous. Then one evening, an older man sat beside Julius at the bar, one of those regulars who seemed to know everyone but never said much. The man glanced at Julius and said something that froze him mid-sip. "You ever heard this riddle?" the man asked, eyes on the mirror behind the bar. "A bird is trapped in a cage. The door's wide open, but it won't fly out. Why?" Julius frowned. Because it doesn't know it's free. The man shook his head slowly. Because it doesn't trust what's outside. Before Julius could ask what that meant, Linda appeared again with his drink. But that riddle, those words, followed him home. He started thinking about cages. About his family, his legacy, his company. How everything around him looked like freedom but felt like a trap. And maybe Linda was the only thing that ever felt like the open door. The next Thursday, she wasn't there. No call. No message. Just gone. When he asked one of the staff, they said she'd quit suddenly. No explanation. Just left mid-shift, walked out into the night. He sat in the booth where they'd last talked, staring at the empty seat. And for the first time, Julius Hayes, the billionaire, the CEO, the man who had everything, felt powerless. The silence pressed in, heavy and personal. And under his breath, he whispered, "Where did you go, Linda?" That's when his phone buzzed. A message from Claire. "You're welcome. She was never right for you." Julius didn't sleep that night. He sat in his penthouse overlooking the city, phone in hand, scrolling through old receipts from the restaurant like a man trying to prove something to himself. Every Thursday for 2 months, same place, same table, same waitress. And now she was gone. Claire's message sat open on his screen like a bruise. "She was never right for you." He called her. No answer. Texted again. Nothing. By morning, he'd convinced himself he was being ridiculous. She was a waitress. People quit jobs all the time. Maybe she got another gig, maybe she moved. But deep down, something felt off, too neat, too coincidental. At noon, he showed up at the restaurant. The manager recognized him immediately and smiled a little too eagerly. "Mr. Hayes, what a surprise. Table for one." "I'm just here to ask about someone," Julius said. "Linda Morales." The man's smile faltered. "She doesn't work here anymore." "I know that," Julius said quietly. "I'm asking why." The manager hesitated. "She left a note for someone. Didn't say who. I wasn't supposed to give it out, but maybe it's for you." He reached under the counter and pulled out a folded napkin, the kind Linda used to jot down quick orders. Julius unfolded it carefully. It said, "Don't look for me. Sometimes love is just a mirror showing what we're afraid to see." No signature. Just that. Julius stared at it, the words pressing into him like a secret he wasn't ready to hear. He went home and didn't tell anyone, not his sister, not his assistant, not even his driver. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized something. Linda had never told him her full story. He knew bits and pieces, that she'd moved from Atlanta, that she was saving up for something, that she used to tutor kids after her shifts. But he'd never asked why she left home, or what she was running from. And maybe now, it was his turn to find out. A week later, he tracked her down. It wasn't hard. Money makes things easier, even when it shouldn't. His investigator sent him an address in Queens, a modest apartment near a laundromat. When he showed up, the building smelled like detergent and rain. He knocked twice. No answer. But as he turned to leave, her voice came from behind the door. "I told you not to look for me." He froze. "Then why did you leave a note?" There was silence. Then the lock turned. Linda opened the door just enough to see his face. No makeup, hair pulled back, eyes tired but steady. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "Then tell me to go," he replied. She didn't. Instead, she sighed and stepped back to let him in. The apartment was small, lived in. Books stacked in corners, an old record player spinning something soft in the background. "You look different," he said quietly. "So do you," she replied. "You look awake." He smiled faintly. "That's your fault." Linda crossed her arms. Why are you really here, Julius? Because I can't stop thinking about you. Her expression softened for a second before she turned away. You're not used to not getting what you want. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He opened his mouth, then hesitated. I don't know yet. She studied him for a long moment, then said, You shouldn't trust me. That hurt more than he expected. Why would you say that? Linda walked to the window, looking out at the street below. Because your sister paid me. The words landed like a slap. He blinked, barely breathing. What? She paid me to be nice to you. To start a conversation about the animal kingdom. Said it was a favor, that you'd never notice. But you did. You noticed everything. Except that I wasn't supposed to matter. Julius felt something in his chest twist. He sat down, hands pressed together. And then what? You just quit because you grew a conscience. I quit because I fell for you. The room went still. Linda turned around, her eyes bright with something raw. And I couldn't keep lying, Julius. Not when every word felt real. So I left. Before your family found out I actually meant it. He didn't say anything. Just looked at her, the woman who'd unknowingly broken down every wall he'd built. Finally, he said, Come back with me. Let me fix this. She shook her head. You can't fix what you don't understand. Then explain it to me. She took a slow breath. Your world and mine don't mix. People like your sister, they don't see me as a person. They see me as a problem. And you've lived in their world too long to see it any other way. Julius wanted to argue, but deep down, he knew she was right. Still, he stepped closer. Maybe I don't want their world anymore. Linda smiled sadly. Then you'll have to give up more than you think. And just like that, she walked him to the door. He stood there for a moment, not ready to leave, when she said something that stopped him cold. You ever hear the riddle about the men who lived in a glass house? She asked. He turned. No. She smiled faintly. He spent his life polishing the glass so everyone could see him clearly, and never realized he was the only one who couldn't see out. Then she closed the door. That riddle, her riddle, echoed in his mind for days. He went back to work, sat in boardrooms, nodded through meetings, but nothing felt the same. He kept thinking about cages and glass houses, freedom and illusion, and the way Linda had looked at him like she could see through all of it. And that's when he made a decision that would change everything. He called a press conference. Standing in front of reporters, lights flashing, cameras rolling, Julius Hayes, the man who never spoke publicly about his personal life, announced that he was stepping down as CEO of Hayes Global. The headlines were instant chaos. His board went into panic. His sister called 32 times that night. He answered none of them. All he could think about was Linda. And how, for the first time in his life, the cage door was actually open. But he had no idea that someone else had already decided to close it again. Because Claire wasn't done. She had her own plan, a cruel one. And the next time Julius saw Linda, it wouldn't be in her apartment. It would be in a courtroom. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in the way silence filled the air before the judge even spoke. Cameras flashed outside, voices murmured behind closed doors. Julius Hayes, once one of the most powerful men in New York, stood at the defense table with nothing left to hide behind. Across the room sat Linda Morales. She didn't look at him. Her hands were clasped tightly together, knuckles pale. She wore a plain gray blazer, probably borrowed, and her expression was unreadable. The accusation was simple but devastating: insider manipulation. Someone had used Julius's private emails to move company funds days before he announced his resignation. On paper, it looked like Linda. Money had hit her bank account, money Claire had transferred under Julius's name. Julius hadn't seen it coming. Not this. His sister sat in the front row, face blank, eyes sharp. She wasn't here to comfort him, she was here to watch. When the judge asked if Julius had anything to say before the hearing began, he stepped forward, voice low but steady. Yes, Your Honor. This woman, Linda Morales, is not guilty. I am. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled. The judge banged the gavel for order. Claire's lips parted just slightly, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. Linda finally looked up, eyes full of shock. But Julius didn't look at her. He looked straight at Claire. This isn't about fraud, he said. This is about control. My family has spent decades deciding what's best for me, who I should love, who I should trust, who I should become. I let them do it. I let them build a cage around me and called it a legacy. His voice broke slightly. But the truth is, I'm done living in a glass house. That last line hung in the air. Linda understood. The riddle she'd told him, the men in the glass house, had finally made sense to him now. The judge sighed. Mr. Hayes, you're not on trial. Then maybe I should be, he said quietly. Because everything that happened to her started with me. There was a long pause. The judge ordered a recess. Claire stormed out, heels clicking like gunshots on the marble floor. Julius followed her into the hallway. Why, he demanded. Why her? Why do this? Claire turned, eyes glistening, not with guilt, but something darker. Because she was going to ruin you. She saved me. She made you weak, Claire hissed. Do you even hear yourself? You threw away the company, the family name, everything father built, for a woman you barely know. Julius shook his head. That company made me rich, but it never made me alive. Claire laughed bitterly. You think this is love? Love doesn't destroy. Love builds. He stared at her for a long time. No, Claire. Love doesn't control. She didn't respond. Just turned and walked away. The case fell apart 2 weeks later. The forensic team traced the wire transfers back to Claire's account. She was arrested quietly, but the media storm was anything but quiet. Julius didn't attend the sentencing. He spent those days walking the city alone, a man untethered from everything that once defined him. When he finally found the courage to see Linda again, she was at a community center in Harlem, teaching after-school science to a group of kids. He stood at the back for nearly half an hour, listening to her explain how dolphins communicate through patterns, her voice calm, animated, alive. When class ended, she saw him by the doorway. Her first reaction wasn't anger or surprise. It was relief. I thought you'd left the city, she said softly. I did, he replied. But not in the way you think. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded napkin, the one she'd left him weeks ago. You said love is just a mirror showing what we're afraid to see, he said. You were right. I was afraid to see who I was without the money, the company, the family. But now I know. Linda looked down, her eyes soft. And who are you now, Julius? He smiled faintly. A man who wants to build something real. No shareholders. No contracts. Just truth. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, quietly, she said, You don't need to prove anything to me. He stepped closer. I'm not trying to prove anything. I just want to live. And for the first time in months, she smiled, really smiled. Over time, they built something small but solid. He invested, not in corporations or boardrooms, but in community projects, the kind Linda cared about. She helped him see the city through different eyes, the teachers, the waitresses, the kids who still believed they could change something. Every Thursday, they'd go back to that same restaurant on 72nd Street, sit at their old table, and laugh about how it all started, with a fake date and a borrowed pen. Sometimes, when the evening got quiet, Julius would still hear the old man's voice in his head. The bird won't fly out because it doesn't trust what's outside. Now, he'd smile at the thought. Because he finally understood, freedom isn't about escaping. It's about trusting what waits for you once you do. And Linda, she was what waited. One late night, months later, as they locked up the community center, Linda leaned against the doorframe and said, "You ever think about what your life would have been like if your sister's plan had worked?" Julius chuckled. "Yeah. I'd probably still be sitting at that table, pretending to be interested in someone else while you walked past with a notepad." Linda tilted her head. "So, do you think fate did this?" He thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No. You did. You chose to be honest when lying would have been easier. You walked out instead of pretending. That's not fate. That's bravery." She smiled. "Guess we both learned something then." "What's that?" "That love isn't about fixing each other. It's about seeing each other clearly." He took her hand. "And maybe cleaning a few glass windows along the way." She laughed softly, resting her head against his shoulder as the lights of New York shimmered in the distance. And for once, Julius Hayes, the man who'd had everything, finally had what he'd been missing all along. Not power. Not wealth. Peace. Before you go, take a moment to tell me in the comments, do you believe love can really change someone, or do we just learn who we were meant to be all along? And if you want more stories like this, ones that dig deep, that make you feel something, hit that subscribe button and join the family. Because sometimes, the best stories are the ones that remind us we're all just trying to find our way out of the cage.